We were talking about Oktoberfest earlier. It's such a neat and historied situation. I mean, Oktoberfest came around in 1491, and it was based on a lord at the time, but Lord Octavius. And later on, he was trying to do more than he could do in a brewery, and he got a doctorate so that he could actually do more in the brewing realm. And they started to call him Dr. Octavius. And he could do so much. It was almost like he had 8 arms. It was a storied deal. So Oktoberfest was built around his celebration for when he would brew a beer, because it would be so big and so many more servings than everybody else's beer. That they would say "Ozat Ease" when they tapped it, which means "man of steel arms." So,
am I to understand also that at that time in Bavaria there was an unfortunate arachnid problem that he was always being pitted against, fighting off these spiders from infecting his brew.
One of those arachnids actually bit and infected King Wenceslas, the patron saint of hops.
Yes, that's right. I've heard this.
Who also went on to become the patron saint of spider-human mutants.
Yes.
And so the two of them had quite the classic battle. And I believe Octavius won that one, which is why it's called Oktoberfest, not Wenceslas Fest.
Right.
Well,
yeah, and so it was actually, Oktoberfest was what they called it, but it was actually Octavius Fest, and then it, that kind of got shrunk into Oktoberfest, and
wouldn't fit on the bumper stickers.
Right, it was real close to a month, so they went with that.
There's actually quite an intense movement in Germany to put the Octavius back in Oktoberfest.
Well, now something's coming on too strong, and I just can't seem to get along. I always try to write a song, but sometimes the words ain't coming out right. Just my niece has left tonight. As long as I've got a pipe, let's go.
Okay, everybody, it's time for You Can't Brew That on Television. Tonight, Bono's going to talk to us about wet hops. Plus, as always, we've got all kinds of beer news for you. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. Here they are, guys, your brewmeisters, Kyle and the Reverend Bono.
Hello, Internet, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of You Can't Brew That on Television. We are your hosts. I am the Reverend Ryan Bono.
I am Kyle from the joined tonight by Chris Terrain.
Excellent. Good to see you have some company. You've needed help for a while. I'm glad to see you finally got it. And the three of us are going to be here tonight, just like we are the third Tuesday of every month, to help you bridge the gap between beer snob and frat boy. Kyle, let's start easy. What are you drinking tonight, buddy?
We are drinking Guinness Nitro IPA. Yeah, it just kind of tickled my fancy at the local Walmart. But it's, it is what it is. It's a Guinness can, and they actually serve this in a 12-ounce can instead of the typical Guinness 16-ounce can that they've been doing for a while. This is a 12-ounce can with the widget and nitro, and it pours, slightly less than a 12-ounce pour, and it's not a bad little beer.
Excellent. Guinness has really been putting out a lot of different stuff lately. The pale, the blonde lager, they had that weird black lager a couple years ago. They're kind of spinning their wheels, but I feel like they might have finally hit on a couple of winners, because I've heard some pretty good things about both of those beers.
Yeah, it's a good thing. They need to compete against the new megapolis of all beer lorddom. I don't know if you've heard that, Bono. I mean,
I think that's worth discussing, actually.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, we'll dive into that here in just a little bit. I am drinking a Stone Enjoy By 103115 IPA. For those of you unfamiliar with the Stone Enjoy By series, it's a series of beers. They release two a year maybe, Kyle? I know the last one was Enjoy By 420. Yeah,
they do several a year now. So I mean, whenever they do it, I think. I don't think there's a specific.
Yeah, it's just basically whenever there's a hop harvest, they use a method known as wet hopping that we're going to discuss here in a little bit, and definitely boost the flavor of the beer. Of the Stone Enjoy Buys that I've had, this one
sucks.
I'm not going to go say it sucks, because the worst Stone beer I've ever had is one of the best beers I've ever had. by Stone standards, it's definitely lacking, I think. But we'll dive into that here in a little bit. So we're just gonna kind of improvise this show tonight a little bit. Rich,
That's what we
steer us
do.
as you need-
Hold on.
Rich, steer us as you need to, and Kyle, what do you want to talk about, man?
Chris and I will bring a little bit more segment in next week, so we'll just tease that a little bit.
Okay.
Bono and I entered and won a competition many years back now. It's been a long time, the Iron Mash in Fort Worth. And since then, Chris actually brewed with Bono and I 1 year before Bono moved back to Seattle. And Chris and I have been brewing together, pretty much standard lately. And we've entered this competition a couple times, and we've managed to make good beers, not great beers. This year, we stepped outside the box a little bit. Did an idea we talked about last year, and we made an ice bock. We had better ingredients this year to allow that to be somewhat of an option. There wasn't nearly enough of the darker grains that we had, but we said, you know what? It's different.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So, it's something that you and I always did too. We wanted to make something different than everybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the key elements of excelling in an Iron Mash competition. But Kyle, for people in the audience that may not be familiar with Icebox, why don't you talk a little bit about that process? Because it's one of the cooler processes in beer brewing, and it's really led to an explosion in freeze distilling over the last 5 to 10 years. So why don't you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. I'll kick it over to Chris a little bit too. I know he knows quite a bit about Icebox, but basically the long and short of it is that Icebox were either an accident or not, but the traditional folklore is that the rookie guy at the brewery forgot to bring in all of the fermenting barrels, and they started to freeze overnight, and they figured that out, and they drug them in, and they said, what do we do? Maybe we can siphon some of this out so it's not ruined.
Scooped out the ice.
They scooped out the ice, they got it all cleaned up, and then what they had was all of the ice left the beer. The ice was only liquid. So they didn't have any of the alcohol in there, any of the body, so they made this condensed, basically a distilled beer.
Yeah, you take out a lot of the water, it takes out some of the particulate, I guess is the right word. So it clears the beer up and it concentrates all the flavors and alcohol and makes it yummy.
Sounds brilliant to me. Beer from concentrate.
That really is kind of what it amounts to. And here over the last 10 years or so, Kyle and Chris, the Brewdog brewery out there in Scotland, I think, is it Brewdog in Scotland, has every few months or every year or so there for a while, it seemed like they were making a new strongest beer in the world, and it would be like 30% or 40% alcohol or something. And the way they were making these intensely strong beers was through freeze distilling. So they would start with like a warehouse full of beer and end with a keg or something ridiculous like that. And that is how you get these beers, because yeast isn't going to survive at 40% alcohol. You can't make a beer the traditional way that way. So you end up freeze distilling the beers. To my knowledge, the strongest beer ever made the traditional method was Sam Adams' Utopias, and you might correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I don't know if anybody has beat our boy down there who's now running Revolver Brewery. He invented basically Utopias. He was the small batch champion of Sam Adams, and when you consider what Sam Adams did with some of their small batches over the last decade, he's done some phenomenal things. However, I'm not sure if he still holds the record or if that still holds the record. But if you ever want to talk to a man who knows his stuff about pitching high levels of yeast and what he can do, he
had some extraordinary advice. Really neat. Because Kyle and I and Chris, I don't know if you were there that night when we got to hear him talk. But he had some really great advice on brewing high gravity beers, and one of the weird things that he suggested, one of the kind of off the cuff bizarro ideas they came up with that actually worked, was using Beano in your beer. because what they were finding was that the yeast was working so fast it was drowning in its own gases, and the Beano slowed that down.
He also talked about oxygenating it mid.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So tell us a little bit, Chris, about oxygenating and why that is helpful when you're making a high gravity beer, and what some good methods are for oxygenating.
I mean, it gets the beer back, the yeast back active. They start reproducing because they hit their point and they're dying off, so they want to rebuild them back up. The oxygen does that. That's the atmosphere they need to reproduce. And then I guess the brewery way is to force it through a stone in the bottom of the fermenter, which is essentially what we do here in the homebrew brewery also.
Yeah, we've got an oxygenation stone that we hook an oxygen tank. You can buy these little welding oxygen tanks from Home Depot, little red tanks, and hook those right up. And they don't last very long, but they do a pretty good job for the home brewing world, and they're only a few bucks a piece. And you introduce that oxygen into the fermenting beer. And in general, he was saying you do it several times throughout the process. And he actually pitched multiple batches of different yeasts throughout the process, not just a blend of yeast, but he pitched yeasts at different times. When we brewed our Eisbach, we're not shooting for 27% alcohol, at least not yet. So what we're going to do is just ferment on a bunch of the Bucking Bach from raw yeast, which is great that was available to us at Iron Mash this year. That made a big decision for us.
That's pretty cool.
Trying to figure out, last year we not only didn't have the grains, but our yeast choices were dry yeast. It would have been really tough for one sachet of dry yeast to produce a really quality lager. So we're talking about making generally a 9 to 10% base beer. So we're going at it hard. We need a lot of yeast. And when they pour a tub of yeast for you and you go, I can just pitch that slug right in there. And you know that beer at 50 degrees is fermenting within an hour or two. You know, you've got an idea. So this particular go around, we took some advice from Carl King, added another step to it too, which you want to go ahead and explain that one?
You got it.
All right. The first thing we did was we did oxygenate the second time, which is part of what you just said. But alternative to that, we also did the drop of olive oil. So, that's often been discussed. Part of what oxygen does for the beer is allows the cells to reproduce. So that's a major portion of it. That's what they need to build to reproduce. Well, one of the things that needs to be in there, are the fats and the lipids. I believe I'm saying that right. I maybe overstepping my bounds there, but it basically allows the cell structure of the yeast to stay intact. Because if they split too many times and they don't have enough resources to make more strong cell walls, then they'll basically reproduce and be weak, and they won't be able to complete their fermentation and clean up all the crap. So you want them to be strong-walled and multiple.
And you're talking just like one drop for a 5-gallon batch.
It's tiny. Wait for the little tiny drop to fall. Okay, that's enough.
Now, Kyle, that's something that we've discussed on the show previously. Is this the first time you've ever been able to try that?
Yes, it's the first time I have tried it. I guess I've been able to many times.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the first time you've tried it, and so how do you feel? How do you feel about the results so far? Have you guys reached your full fermentation? Do you think it made a difference?
We'll see. We didn't bother taking a read or a sample tonight, which we probably should have, as we're introducing our figgy poop log into the top of our fermenter.
I'm sure it brought a lot of sugars back to the table. So.
We'll see, and thinking about it, may want to go ahead and hit it with a little more oxygen, shake up that yeast. But we were talking about adding these figs, not so much for the fermentation characteristics, but because we were lacking some of the dark grains that we wanted to have in that base beer, we figured we could supplement that with taking some of the dark caramely and dark fruit characteristics that you get from a fig, and allowing the beer to absorb some of that flavor. So we really don't want it to kick into a secondary fermentation and eat all the sugars. We want some of those to maintain, to emulate some of those things that happen through long-term aging of an Eisbach. We'll see. We figured it was a marriage in the concept and ingredients, and that we could maybe do something special with it for Iron Mash.
Excellent.
just with that situation, any off flavors when you're doing an ice box, you're concentrating those off flavors. So
If we screwed up anywhere,
hopefully we didn't get any.
Yeah. If you screw up, you'll know.
right? Hopefully, the only dark, odd-shaped log that we shoved into our beer was one that we meant to.
You never know, buddy.
Bread on it, right?
There's some
Sounds
bread on
risky,
it.
but you're pros.
Now that it's fun. Iron Mash is a competition near and dear to our hearts. Chris Terrain actually helped Bono and I and Chris Bradley when we ran it one year. It was a lot of fun, and we've enjoyed the competition, Easy Killer, for quite some time, and it's just a unique experience that most clubs and most groups don't have because everybody shows up in one spot with all their equipment. They get random ingredients. You're forced to, within an hour, come up with a recipe, brew the beer, and you got to be out of that area by 3 o'clock. So you're competing for electrical and water resources. They're trying to help you best they can. Everybody works together. Oh, I forgot my this, and here's my this. Okay. Oh, I forgot. Can I borrow this? When you first start doing the competition, you're looking around going, is this really a competition? Because everybody is helping everybody to succeed. And that's what makes that competition special because really everybody tries to make everybody succeed. And it takes a phenomenal beer and a phenomenal creative mind for a 1 hour time period to win that competition.
That's kind of the thing, right? You kind of want to be beaten at some level. Like you want to be the best, but you also want to drink something that's better than what you've made. So you'll get to sample that at some point if it's really awesome.
And we also figured that the guy that won it a few years back made an old ale, and which is like ridiculously large for this competition, and he won.
That's amazing.
So he hosted it this year, so that's why we figured it was a good year to make a beer even bigger than what he made. Hope he's judging.
Yep, good. The nice thing is raw brewing. They provide us with hot water. It's strike temperature, and this year they actually gave us. They give you filtered water. They also gave us chilled water, like 32-degree water.
Nice.
Pressure's a little bit off, so we didn't get a good chill on those people that were finishing up early, but we got to use good cold water to chill real fast.
Yeah, so the water's going through the glycol system and coming out at 32 degrees, so it's coming into your system whether you can't run it fast because everybody's sharing the same flow, but you can end up chilling your beer to a much lower temperature than you could even at your house at this time of year. Really nice. So we appreciate that.
At your house, maybe.
My house has some well water, so it's at least a little chilly sometimes. Your house is in Seattle.
Yeah.
That water is.
We get some pretty cold water. We chill fairly quickly here.
Yeah.
I still got 80 degrees in my house.
So are you going to do any of those, like jump into the ocean on February 1st type?
Polar bear swim?
Yeah, polar bear swim. That's what it is.
Yeah, the ocean here is pretty much the same temperature year round, and I don't know. It doesn't really get cold enough here for polar bear swims. It doesn't get very cold here.
Maybe you can find a nice pond up by Mount Rainier where the snowmelt is.
There you go. Or I could just jump the border over to Canada. I hear that it gets cold in Canada from time to time.
Hey.
Oh yeah.
Almost made it.
Almost made it.
All right, Bono, what you got? Let's talk about some wet hops.
Let's talk about wet hops. Kyle, we've talked about dry hopping in the past.
Yep.
And it sounds gross, but let's talk about dry hopping and then we'll discuss what wet hopping is after that. Dry hopping, for those in the audience who aren't necessarily familiar, when you make your beer, you're going to boil for 45 to 90 minutes, sometimes longer, and while you're boiling your beer, your future beer, you're throwing in hops. And the longer you boil your hops, the more bitterness you're getting out of them, and a little less flavor and aroma. So when you throw your hops into the already cold and fermenting beer, you're dry hopping. Now that's called dry hopping. So this time of year, here in the Pacific Northwest, the shelves are full of beers called wet hopped, or sometimes they're called fresh hopped. And what this means is that brewers are taking hops directly off the vine and putting them into beer within 24 hours of harvesting. Usually, like, you go to the store, you get hops. Kyle, I know you like to order from Hops Direct. And what happens with those hops is that they're taken off the vine, they're dried immediately because the hop is a very, very fragile flower. And so they're taken off the vine, they're dried immediately, and then you can store them for quite a while after they've been dried. But during wet hop season, they don't dry the hops. They just take them off the vine and put them directly into your beer. I know Stone, when they make their Enjoy by beers, which I'm drinking one tonight, when they make their Enjoy by beers, they strive to have the hops in the beer within 24 hours of harvesting. So hops are harvested, they're rushed to the Stone Brewery, and they're immediately thrown into the fermenting beer, or the fermented beer, as it may be. So what does this do for your beer? Kyle, you've had plenty of Stone Enjoy by. Let's talk a little bit about what it does to the flavor profile and even to a small extent the mouthfeel when you drink when you have a wet hopped beer.
Well, part of what drying a hop does is it preserves it, right? That's the general reason why you're doing a dry hop beer, or why you're doing drying of hops, is so that those hops can last for a long time. If you just leave hops wet and they naturally stay where they're at, then they're just going to mold or start to go bad, basically. Well, the reason why is because they have their own moisture content. They have more to offer than just the different alpha and beta acids. So, there's a lot more to them, and some of those flavors get destroyed by the drying process. And when you introduce them to the beer wet, it allows a lot more flavor to come through. It allows a lot more of the resins to come through in the beer, a lot more of the grassy, like live plant type vegetable flavors to come through in the beer. It's really it's a remarkable way to get a product, and it's probably how most breweries did it, hundreds of years ago when they were brewing with hops.
Oh, almost certainly, yeah. I mean, but before they discovered the ability and really the benefits of drying hops, that's probably exactly what they did. I mean, beer brewing probably revolved around the hop harvest. And the way I've always described the flavor of a wet hopped beer is it almost tastes juicy. Like there's almost like a juice aspect to the hop flavor, the hop characteristics. It's very difficult to articulate, really, but I mean it's like drinking hop juice when it's overly hopped, overly wet hopped, and properly done. And up here this time of year, every brewery's got a fresh hop here or a wet hop beer. Stone releases its Enjoy by beers. Guys, if you haven't had this one, this isn't their greatest Enjoy by. I would say this is their least enjoyable Enjoy by. It's still one of the best IPAs I've ever had. So you might hear me talking trash about it, but this is phenomenal beer. It's just not great by Stone standards. So you see this in the store, pick it up, and you'll get a sense of what we're talking about, because it really is very difficult to describe the flavor profile of a wet hop beer.
So one of the things that they do a lot with the wet hops is they introduce them late in the boil so that it doesn't eliminate all of those aromatic oils. So it's going to add a lot of flavor, but it's going to add a lot more aroma too. So you'll end up with a beer that is different every year. What you just described, part of the fun of trying that is this year, it may be phenomenal, maybe the best year ever. Next year, it may not be. So you don't know what you're going to get as a brewer, let alone as a consumer of the product. So you're just trying to get somewhere close. You're talking about these hops showing up 24 hours after being harvested. They don't have time to test. They don't have time for other people to tell them what the alpha acids are at least, and be able to figure out really more than just alpha acids. They can come up and get kind of a rough idea of how bitter their beer is going to be, but they're not going to be able to go through a long-term testing. They're not going to make a pilot batch. This is just going to be a one-time beer that is made at large scale, and it either works or it doesn't.
So that beer was made in August maybe. Did,
I got the email that it was on its way in mid-September. No, I think it was early September. So yeah, I'm willing to bet it was made in August probably.
It was an early harvest this year because they had some real rough weather, some dry spells followed by too much water, all the same things that we get down in Texas all the time. They had that big time up in the Yakima Valley this year.
Yeah, Yakima Valley had a pretty rough summer, and yeah, another Kyle, you're talking about the difference from harvest to harvest, from batch to batch. One possible reason that I'm a little underwhelmed by this particular bottle of Enjoy By is that the one they did this past spring, the Enjoy By 42015, was extraordinary. It was easily the best one I've ever had. It was absolutely amazing. And so yeah, batch to batch, it is going to be different depending on which hops they use, of course, but also depending on just the nature of the harvest itself.
And from what they said about the hop harvest this year, I mean, some of the styles of hops were decimated. And the way that the brewers have their first share, they buy so much of a particular hop. If there is a crappy harvest for that particular hop, it may all be sold before the harvest is even done. And that means none are left for consumers. None are left for specialty beers like this unless they had that as part of their program. So a lot of times what happens is the wet hop beers, they say, what do you have a glutton of? What is there in excess? This year, it happened to be Cascade, which is a very, very good hop. However, it's old compared to American standards. So part of what you're experiencing may be that, it's just some of the first type of hops that you've ever had. And so it's just kind of like, well, I've had this for decades and maybe I don't love it, or maybe it's just that's the quality of hops you got this year. It's really neat. It's fun.
Yeah, so wet hop beers, delicious. Try them if you see them. I highly recommend it. I know Kyle, and I know you're a big fan of wet hop beers. Let's we've got a couple minutes left. Well, and it's cider season. So, Kyle, have you? A few years ago, we did an episode about ciders. We highlighted Crispin specifically, which is just a phenomenal cider company. Have you gotten into ciders at all since we did that episode?
I'm not really a cider man. Man. I don't go anywhere a cider man can.
Are we doing this again?
Sorry. No, I just don't tend to lean towards the ultra sweet. So no, I mean, I haven't been grasping onto this this new cider, and in that case, mead. There's also a lot of meaderies coming around.
Mead is really, yeah, you're right. Mead is really starting to catch on. I was at the Saucer just about a week and a half ago, and a buddy of mine ordered a mead, and it's not for me. I mean, like you can get a dry cider that's not terribly sweet. There are plenty of beer drinkers ciders out there. There are no beer drinkers meads. Like mead is going to be sickly sweet no matter what.
And at Beer Feast, I love how they give you a little Pilsner in the same 4-ounce cup, and they give you a 20-ounce mead or mead in the same 4-ounce cup. And enjoy that one. That's a kick in the teeth, really.
So I might be paying more attention to the mead or the cider scene lately, but my sister-in-law, she's kind of a gluten-free kind of diet, and so I know the ciders are really popular among that ilk. And it seems like where there used to be maybe 1 or 2 options, they're all over the place now. So that segment's definitely expanding.
Cider has really exploded onto the scene in recent years, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest, where there's, of course, lots of apple orchards. And a buddy of mine and I went to a cidery last December, tasted some really cool ciders, learned that cider is easily a more in-depth hobby than beer. I mean, there's so many types of apples out there. The gentleman that we were speaking to at this particular cidery regularly uses over 60 different varieties of apple in one batch. And so he'll have some varieties that offer bitterness and some varieties that offer, I think he was talking about tannins, and some that offer sweetness. And he said some are completely flavorless, colorless. They're just basically there for alcohol content. So cider is really coming into its own. And that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So the guy that I brew with up here and I actually bought 5 gallons of a fresh pressed cider here just a couple weeks ago that is unpasteurized, and so we're just letting it ferment using wild yeast, and really looking forward to seeing how that comes out. Kyle, if it comes out well, I'll definitely send you guys a couple bottles.
Sounds great, man.
Yeah, usually when you let a cider ferment using natural wild yeast, you're typically going to get a drier cider. Those wild yeasts are generally pretty thorough and very, very good at what they do. So it shouldn't be too terribly sweet. There's going to be a little bit of sour in it, I'm assuming. And just really looking forward to seeing what that tastes like.
What type of apples did you use? What type of apples?
I don't know. Whatever came from the orchard that got pressed. Yeah, there's so many orchards up here with so many different styles of apple. I stopped paying attention.
I've had Green's Delicious. I've never had I don't know.
You should try it, dude. It's taken the cider world by storm.
Yeah.
I've had the Woodchuck Granny Smith cider.
Okay.
Nice
Woodchuck is a good solid cider maker. There's a cider maker up here in the Pacific Northwest called Schilling, and they make lots of different kinds of ciders. Strawberry ciders. They make some pear ciders, a habanero cider, and they all suck. Every single cider they make sucks. I have no idea how this company's in business.
That's a new drop for me. Thank you.
Pound for pound, Schilling isn't very good.
Pound for pound, Schilling is not good.
Okay. So to clarify.
All right, so I feel like we're starting to wind down a little bit here on our improvised topics, but I definitely think that we should come up with some topics for next month so that we're not just throwing these together at the last second.
Yes.
I'm gonna
next
have
month on You Can't Brew That. Topics
I'm gonna
and
have
such.
There you go. I'm going to have another Sweetless in Seattle segment. I'm going to be checking out the Kodiak Brown Porter from Sailor's Sea Brewing Company right here in Edmonds. Kyle, any thoughts on what you want to talk about?
Yeah, we're going to bring the video that Chris and I were working on before the show, about the iron mash. So we talked about what we did with the ice bock. Well, what's making it an ice bock is these figs and what we did to make the figs into the beer and some of the little other subtleties. We'll have a video and by we, I mean, I'll send a raw video to Richard, and he'll spend a lot of time making it good, and then we'll see what goes on. But
Rich is really good at that.
That's what I do. You guys make the beer, I'll make the funny video.
We're good.
Be able to figure out how we're going to ice this and get it all worked out.
Yeah,
I was just going to ask, so you guys are going to use the traditional icing method then?
One of the traditional methods. There is no real traditional method. And by the way, we're probably not actually going to do that because in some states that's illegal. So
I guess it would be because it's distilling. Yeah, so you're not going to do that.
We may not do that, but we're going to discuss some options for if we
certainly wouldn't do it in a state in which it was illegal at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Or transported over borders somehow.
Distilling is illegal, and so you guys would never do that.
I've been messing with this fermentation chamber for a while. It's hot, it's cold, sometimes it's 32 degrees, sometimes it's 30 and a half. We'll see. It's on the fritz, but we'll get it going.
Yeah, we accidentally made an ice brown in that thing, that fermentation chamber a few years ago.
Yeah, we did. It helps when the probe stays inside the fermentation chamber. That tends to allow it to control itself a little better.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think I might have bumped that out.
It happens.
Yeah. Whatever. Chris, it's been a pleasure having you on, man. What do you think we should talk about next month?
I don't know. It's
terrific advice as always. Thank you, Chris.
It's getting to be a holiday season here. You might just talk about some spiced beers or something.
Yeah. I like that idea.
We can carry on we
talk about some mulling spices. Kyle, you and I made a beer with mulling spices a few years ago, and I feel like we learned some valuable lessons when we made that.
Yeah. definitely. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great plan. Actually, that's definitely going on next month's schedule.
We'll have at least 30 days to mull that over.
Well, yes, we shall. All right.
By the way, I thought it was a good presentation today. I liked what we talked about.
Definitely.
You brought up apple-based, fermented products, because we normally just do grain-based, and sometimes we do other things. As far as apple-based fermented products, I'm still undecided. But I'm willing to take a little advice and some more about the products.
All right, that's pretty lame, buddy.
Have me on.
I applaud you getting any possible pun in there. That's important. What we do.
I would, however, like to just start doing regular episodes. Not like every month or anything, but maybe once a year or so, we'll do an episode where we talk a little bit more about cider. Especially me being up here, cider is really popular up here with all the apple orchards. So I think that should become a regular part of the show.
For sure.
Yeah.
We'll have our seasonal highlights.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kyle, what?
Specialty show once a year that is all about things that will expire and be worthless as far as knowledge of beer and brewing the next year, and we'll do an Enjoy by Brew show.
Nice, I like it.
Excellent.
So you can't brew that on television. Enjoy by the end of this show,
Right.
because everything we tell you is gonna be useless by tomorrow.
We'll do it
I love
live.
it. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Well, Rich, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
Nothing of consequence. I like the rhythm you've got going, so carry on.
Okay. Rich, I don't have my script in front of me, so I don't have all that stuff about our Twitter feed and Facebook and whatever else. Do you want to read that stuff
Yeah, we'll
before I
keep
do
it
our
simple. I
traditional?
I always like to remind people that if you want to catch out our past episodes, we're on YouTube. The channel is youtube.com/tvlonestar. We've got a You Can't Brew That on Television playlist all lined up for you, so you can go all the way back to the original season, watch the poster falling off the wall, as well as keep up with our latest episodes as they come out. We've got some social media options for the viewers out there. Doglegs on Twitter and Facebook is Dogleg Brewery. Gorgeous George Brewing, I assume, is there's going to be some outreach available for you guys up north in the future. And finally, if anybody wants to write to the show, email address here is ycbtot@frontiertelevision.com. So send us your notes, send us your ideas. Clearly, we sometimes are scrambling for content, so we'll always take that into consideration. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Rich. And for those of you watching at home, we would like you to always remember that we are not professionals.
So please try this at home.
Cheers, buddy.
Well, I sit up, down, flip it around, dress it up nice and then take it to town, and I can't even try to stay above the ground, and I won't even try cause it's a safe sound, cause I know I should just sail away. Whoa, I said nothing is wrong, everything's right, fucking up shit on a Saturday night, and those tires I might just can't say a sign, and I won't even try to up on it like cause I say